First of all, I have been a buyer of gold and silver for a long time. I bought yesterday, $46.39 to be exact. Now, why did I do that when my average cost is about $18? Because JP Morgan Chase and Hong Kong Shanghai Bank corporations are naked short outrageous amounts of contracts. They don't have any silver, and they can't borrow any. There isn't any available, and one of these days, soon, they're going to have to do something. And the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Corporation, has stood by and allowed this to happen. So they've been aiding and abetting Morgan and Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. And the reason for that is they are part owners of the Federal Reserve, along with Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and a host of others in the United States and Europe. And so there's rules for them and there's rules for us. But this time, something has to happen. They can't cover their short position. For those of you who don't understand that, shorting is betting something is going to go down. And when you want to close out your position, you buy the position back in. They have no way of covering. I'm sure right this minute, in New York and Washington, they're having meetings. How are we going to solve this problem? I mean, it's gotten out of hand. People are taking delivery of all kinds of silver, and the bottom line is we're stuck. And of course, all the pros know that, and they keep on jamming them. Everybody talks about $50 silver because that was the high before, more or less. And usually you look for resistance at $50, but in this case it's a little bit different. Because usually what happens is you have cycles that are usually 1 or 2 or 3 years apart, not 30. The average investor is 55, 60 years old. The people who went long silver, who now want to get out close to $50, they're all dead. Of course, except for me. And I'm not a zombie, believe me. And so there's no overhang. It's going to go through 50 like it wasn't there. And at 55 and 60s, $60, I think that's where they're going to try to make a decision. What are we going to do? Here's their 3 choices. Holders of contracts in futures, gold and silver options, derivatives, on the COMEX and on the LBMA in London. We don't have the money to pay, we don't have the silver. So we'll pay you 25, 50 cents on the dollar. Take it or leave it. The next option is total default. It's possible. The third option is the Federal Reserve buys the contracts and pays for them in cash in behalf of the American public so that you could get to pay the bill. Now, what is the bill going to be? At yesterday's prices, that bill is $90 billion for the 2 of them. At $60, $55 in that price range, somewhere between 135 and 140 billion. I don't think the American public's going to be too happy about that, especially with what's going on in there, asked to use austerity and asked to give up part or all of their Social Security and Medicare. Well, Wall Street's getting bailed out again. So perhaps a Fed bailout might be out of the question. We don't know. But those are the options. What's going to be the fallout? First of all, if the Fed comes in, there'll be damage. The psychological damage. The other 2 options It's not only psychological, it's dreadful. And what will happen is that people will not want to buy gold and silver in the comics or the LBMA, and they won't want to buy those options or their derivatives. And if the first two options I gave you are used, partial payment in cash or default, anybody holding those derivatives options are going to lose their money. And the biggest holders are the exchange-traded funds, SLV and GLD. And they could lose 2/3 of their value. And that's why I've never recommended this, because I've seen this coming for a long time. And they were invented by the US government. Believe me, they were. To siphon off professionals and others from investing in gold and silver bullion and shares. That was the whole idea. And of course, they're supposed to be holding bullion. We don't know how much they're holding because we don't have an outside audit on either of them. They may have none. They may have 25% or 30%, but they sure don't have more than that. And so that's the way this thing's going to play out. What's going to happen after they decide to bite the bullet and say this is what we're going to do? Silver's going to jump and gold's going to follow. Where will it go? Well, if it's $60 when they make the announcement, it could go up to 80 or 90. And then once the crisis is over, because that's exactly what it'll be, it'll probably slip back to 70, 75, maybe 60, who knows? But the point is that it's going to continue to go upward because people are going to be buying their gold and silver in a cash market, and they're not going to be playing those paper games the way they did before. In fact, those markets in comics and the LBMA may not open up again. We don't know. All we can do is guess and try to back in to what might happen.